Welcome to the show. I am Chris Graham. This is the Jerry Ratcliffe Show, and I am the lucky guy who gets to co-host with the Hall of Famer Jerry Ratcliffe, and we're going to talk a lot of UVA football. We'll talk some UVA basketball recruiting towards the end of the show here. But Jerry, first, here we are recording on Tuesday. Coach Tony Elliott, has had his weekly press conference with reporters to, I guess, look back to week 2, the JMU loss, and then look ahead to week 3, short week with Maryland, Virginia going to Maryland College Park on Friday night. Maybe first off, just some of your impressions, highlights of the press conference. Anything that Coach Elliott had to say that stood out to you.
Wasn't a lot of stuff that jumped out. As expected, Tony Muskett is going to be day to day, but I fully expect him to probably start against Maryland. He is back fully in practice. He's been able to make all the throws, and it seems like he's in good enough health to play, which comes as no surprise, really. Tony's philosophy is the same as most head football coaches, that you don't lose your position, your starting job, due to injury. So when you're healthy enough to resume play, you resume as the starter. Certainly he could play his way out of it, and they could go to Anthony Colandrea, the true freshman. But, as he told us Saturday, that Muskett, under an emergency situation, would have been available to play Saturday. So his range of motion in his shoulder had improved greatly. So I believe he'll probably be starting against the Terps on Friday night. And I don't know what kind of a short leash he might be on, but I would think that if he can't move the team, that they would switch to Colandrea to see if they could get something positive going. He said it's probably the healthiest the team has been so far this season. So I know they got Sackett Woods back and a couple other guys. So in that regard, I think they'll be in good health. And he said that, I thought it was interesting that he said that, looking back on Saturday, coming out of the storm delay, that as he looked back on it, he didn't do a very good job of getting his team ready to play those final 12 minutes. And as a result, what could have been a very positive win that they could build some momentum off of, turn into an extremely disappointing loss, to see them blow an 11-point lead with 12 minutes to play, and had all the momentum going their way, and just let JMU off the hook.
Did he address? We both wrote about this, Jerry. So I'll ask. I skimmed through the transcript. I was looking more for quarterback stuff, and I thought it was interesting. No one asked directly who's starting at quarterback, but the comments he made after the game about phones in the locker room during that break. We both wrote about this, and both in the context of what he had to say about his, whether it was a throwaway line or not. He said that he had to focus on keeping his guys off their phones during that hour plus long delay. Whereas Curt Cignetti, the JMU coach, he seems to run a tighter ship over there. Did Coach Elliott address that at all today?
That did not come up during the press conference, which I was kind of surprised. I know it, at least on my Twitter account and some other platforms, that has been a very hot topic over the weekend and even into today. Fans were very upset about what they perceived as a lack of discipline in the locker room. If he was spending all of his time getting guys off their cell phones instead of focusing on how to win the game, then that's not a good look. And even if that is what happened, and he said it did, we don't know to what degree, but I think he probably learned a lesson there as a young head coach, that you keep those kind of things behind closed doors. You don't announce it publicly to the media and to your fan base. So it the appearance is horrible for what he's trying to accomplish. It looks like that there was a lack of discipline in the locker room and a lack of focus, and they certainly played that way when they came back out for the final 12 minutes of the game, as opposed to JMU, who Cignetti told us that he spent his entire hour and whatever working not only on X's and O's and finding ways to win the game strategically, but also worked on his team psychologically. He felt like that the break helped them, and I think it was a tremendous help to them because of the way they approached it. And he told his team, look, it's simple. We go out and we score, we make a stop, we score again, we win the game. Now, it's not as simple as all that because you got to execute and count on Virginia coming out flat and not playing well and not executing. But that's what happened. And, you know, Virginia had scored 21 points unanswered before the storm. And had the storm not have come, they had JMU on their heels. I think they might have blown JMU out for all we know, but I think they certainly would have won. And instead, they yanked victory from the defeat from the jaws of victory, as they say in reverse. And so that's something that they're going to shake their heads off. And it could come back to haunt them if they do get anything turned around as the season goes.
Yeah, it's hard to figure that this would have been an upset if Virginia would have held on to win. JMU was a 6-point or more favorite, depending on which Vegas betting line you looked at. But Virginia, yeah, they were up 35-24. I fully agree, Jerry. It felt like to me in the stadium there that, I mean, what Coach Cignetti said after the game, which was his team was tired. They maybe were lacking in confidence. And so both X's and O's and psychology wise, he and his staff were able to use that hour plus to get things back in the right direction for their side. Whereas the Virginia side just didn't seem to have that focus. One thing among the things that stood out, I mean, that's a 36-35 game, and both teams had 395 yards total offense. You can't get much closer than the way that game played out on the field, stats-wise and otherwise. Among the things that stood out to me, Jerry, is this is a surprise. Coach Elliott, and then when he hired Des Kitching to be his offensive coordinator, he came in a couple of years ago saying, we need to run. We need to run the ball. We're going to be as close to a 50-50 team as possible. When we started examining his record at Clemson, where he was the play caller for 7 years, he had great quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, but they still ran the ball an awful lot to make those quarterbacks even better as a result. Last year actually was a small step back. They actually ran for slightly less per game than they did the year before under Robert Anae, Robert Anae, the offensive coordinator under Bronco Mendenhall, barely ran the ball. And this year, another big step back. When you look at the first game, the loss to Tennessee, Virginia gained 117 sack-adjusted yards on the ground. Last week, 43 sack-adjusted rushing yards. Coach Elliott talked at length today about the running game and O-line and how this can all play together. What was the sense you got from hearing him talk about what they can do to shore that up?
Well, I'll tell you what the difference is between Clemson and here is that Clemson had a big, nasty, physical, experienced offensive line chock full of guys who are playing on Sunday. Virginia doesn't have any of those guys, and I don't know if any of these guys will develop into that. Some of them are pretty young and may have that kind of potential, but at this point in time, this offensive line, and I asked Tony about this at the press conference today. I said, we all knew heading into the season that this was going to be a challenge to say, and that might be an understatement, but I asked him if he had any hope of these linemen coming together at some point during the season. And he said hope. And he was talking about that he has seen them at times, I guess, during training camp or practice where all 5 or 6 linemen were on the same page cohesive, and he said it was like poetry in motion. Now, we haven't seen that in a game yet. If we have, I haven't noticed. And he also talked about it's the most developmental position on the team other than quarterback, which is true. It usually requires the smartest guys on your team because it's a very complicated position to play, all the spots on the offensive line. And he just says we've got to get better. And I guess it's just a matter of more reps through the season, more game experience, and coaching him up through the fundamentals and hoping that at some point it clicks. But he also mentioned that it's one position in terms of recruiting that you just can't miss on, because you can sign a linebacker or a tight end, and if they don't work out at that spot, they can move to another spot. Running backs can play wide receiver or move over to defense. Safeties and stuff can move, corners can move, et cetera, et cetera. If you're an offensive lineman, there's nowhere else to go. So you're stuck with what you recruit, and they definitely need some upgrades there. And we'll see how that goes in recruiting in the future. But right now, this offensive line has caused Virginia to rank near the bottom of the FBS in a lot of categories. Offensive rushing, for example, they rank 124 out of 132 teams with 56.5 yards rushing per game, 1.51 yards per carry average. That's just the beginning of the problem. They are number 125 in sacks allowed with 8, as compared to Duke, whose offensive line hasn't given up a sack all year. And it makes me wonder, if Duke can recruit a solid offensive line that it can run with and protect the passer, why can't Virginia? What are the standards that Duke has the same standards as Virginia is last time I looked. Tackles for loss, in other words, tackled in the backfield, Virginia is number 131, Chris, out of 132 teams. 21 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. So if you're doing that kind of stuff, it's hard to beat anybody unless your quarterback is having a brilliant day, which Anthony Colandrea did. And if he had not played well, it might have been a rout, as some of the JMU fans predicted. But Colandrea kept them in the game and gave them a chance to win. They scored enough points to win. In this case, the defense really let them down. And the offensive line, just like you said, they want a balanced attack. We haven't seen that. And until this offensive line gets its act together, we're not going to see it.
That performance, that output, 35 points, is the high watermark to this point for the Tony Elliott era. That's only 12 games. Virginia had scored 34 in the opener last year against Richmond, so 35 against an actual FBS team in JMU, and it's with a freshman quarterback. So, good work for Colandrea. You mentioned the defense. It's been surprising. 42.5 points a game given up by this unit so far this year, and the run defense on Saturday in week 2 got my attention. JMU ran for 168 sack-adjusted rushing yards on 33 carries, 5.1 yards per carry. And I mean, when I started looking at, I looked in depth at the Pro Football Focus numbers. You can look at direction, basically which gaps they ran through. 80 of those yards were just up the A gap, basically just hand the ball off and run over center. 80 yards on 10 attempts. So, the rush defense, I thought the defensive line would have been a strength for this team this year. That's the unit that seemed to bring back the most guys. The secondary, we knew there were some questions, and we're seeing the questions not being answered quite yet when you look at some of the numbers back there. But yeah, So, it's hard to win games. You talked about the offensive line. When both of your lines are struggling, it's really hard to win games. That's where the game is won.
Oh, no doubt about it. And Tony Elliott confirmed that today, mentioning that I don't remember his direct quote, but he essentially said that there he was disappointed that their two main goals, their keys to win this game coming in was to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, to be able to run the ball on JMU, and to be able to stop JMU's running game. And they did none of that. And I'm telling you, man, if you can't close down the A gap, then you've got worlds of problems. Because if the other team is successful running the A gap, they can do anything they want to on offense, and there's not much you can do about it. Everybody that's ever coached football will tell you that you can't control the A gap. You've already lost the football game, and so that's very revealing right there. Those PFF numbers that you researched, good research on your part, and it's been really disappointing. I think this defense was supposed to be the stalwart of the team, something that maybe could hold down the fort until the offense developed. And these guys have been just a massive disappointment so far. And the fact that when JMU came out, Chris, after the storm and marched down the field 80 yards twice in a row, and without a whole lot of difficulty, and aided by a couple of really crucial penalties by Virginia on that winning scoring drive, that was vastly disappointing because they just ran through Virginia's defense like it was Swiss cheese. And then you look at that winning touchdown pass, there was nobody near that receiver, nowhere close. And we didn't see that last year very much. This defense seemed a lot more fundamentally sound and didn't give up the explosive plays. I think this defense so far after 2 weeks is one of the worst in the country in surrendering the explosive plays. It wasn't supposed to be like that. And, they're number 116 in the country and total defense. They're giving up almost 6 yards per play, 447 yards per game, and number 123 in defense against the run, giving up 227 yards on the ground, almost 5.5 yards a carry after 2 games. And going into College Park, Chris, if they don't shore up those numbers, it could be another long night against the Terps.
It's a small sample size still. We've only played 2 games of the season, and most schools have only played 2 games this season. Like I guess a couple have played 3 because of the week 0 start a few weeks ago. But looking at Tennessee and what they did this weekend, they struggled to beat an FCS team, Austin Peay, that's 0-2. That game was 23-13 in the fourth quarter in Neyland Stadium. Virginia had so much trouble in week 1 moving the ball, had 201 yards total offense. Austin Peay had 360 yards total offense. They threw for 260 in that game. And that despite sacks. Tennessee, just like Tennessee's front, put pressure on Tony Musket, and then Colandrea in his little mop-up role at the end of the game. I believe there were 8 sacks by Tennessee in that game of Austin Peay. But, Austin Peay hung around. So, we made Tennessee look really good. And, Tennessee fans are now – I was, following up with some of their post-game coverage from some of their websites, and fans are up in arms about what's wrong with Tennessee. And we looked at that first game and thought, well, that's just a really good SEC team that just blew the doors off of us. Now, switching gears and going up to College Park, there's a Tagovailoa up there that we got to be paying attention to. A quarterback, they score points. They had 38 in their win this past weekend over Charlotte, 38-20 win. I think they had 38 in week 1 as well. So this Maryland team can put the points on the board. They've been improving the last few years. I think they won 7 games last year in the Big Ten. So, the Maryland fans and the Maryland program looks at this game and says, this is a W for us. coming up here in the College Park on a Friday night. They're expecting that. And Maryland is not an easy place for Virginia teams to play, whether it be basketball or whatever, football or whatever sport it is. That's a tough place to play. And on a Friday night, I imagine it's going to be even tougher.
Yeah, no question about it. I remember back when they were in the ACC, and it was Bird Stadium then. I think they've sold out the rights to some corporation for the name of the stadium that escapes me. But that game atmosphere up there didn't used to be that great. I don't know if it's changed since they left the ACC or not, but they had a lot of problems trying to attract fans to the games, and it was never an intimidating atmosphere. But for some reason, Virginia normally struggled to walk out of there with a win, as you pointed out. And I don't know how good Maryland is. They've beaten Towson and Charlotte. I think if Virginia had opened the season against Towson and Charlotte, they might be 2-0 as well. But they do have a good quarterback, as you mentioned, Tua's younger brother, who came up there with Lockley, who was Alabama's offensive coordinator, and brought Tua's brother with him to College Park. He's having a good season as expected. He threw for 287 against Charlotte and completed 25 of 36 passes. He's supposed to be a pretty cool customer who can hurt you with his arm and his legs. They have a pretty good running back in Roman Hemby, who rushed for 162 yards. So that's going to be another challenge for Virginia's defense, front seven, to try to shut down Maryland's running game. They didn't put much pressure on McLeod from Clemson or JMU this past week. He had all day, most of the time, to throw his passes. So if they don't put any more pressure than that on this Terrapin quarterback, I struggled to pronounce that last name, Tagovailoa or something like that.
Tagovailoa, and I will agree with Coach Elliott. The first name is also hard, so we'll just say E.
Yeah. He calls him Tua just because of his brother.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's going to be an interesting game to see what kind of adjustments that Virginia is going to make in this off week. What their game plan is going to look like. Charlotte was able to pass for nearly 200 yards on the Maryland secondary, so I'll be curious to see what Musket and or Colandrea can put together against the Terps. I don't know. I think this game will probably tell us a little bit more about this Virginia team and what we can expect the rest of the season. The Tennessee game was kind of an aberration, I think, because nobody really expected them to compete very well in that. And maybe Tennessee got overconfident because it was so easy beating Virginia. Because I know you talked about the fans were upset over the Austin Peay game. Well, the players were too. Apparently, they had a players-only meeting to try to figure out what went sideways. But in the JMU game, it was such a different, contrasting game before the storm and after the storm. I think Maryland will tell us a little bit more, as will perhaps the NC State game next week, also on a Friday night. I don't know how we got stuck with all these Friday night games, but I guess TV. But I'm intrigued by Colandrea. I really am. I know. I'm expecting that if Musket struggles, that they'll go to Colandrea and give him a shot to see if he can put some points on the board. And that's what I liked about him. He used his feet. He used his unpredictability. He was able to improv when things broke down, something you really can't coach. And he kept plays alive with his feet. Wasn't afraid to throw it deep. I think that stunned JMU to some degree. They weren't expecting that. I think they were looking for the short and intermediate passing game, but this guy came out firing on all cylinders, man. He has no fear, and I really like that in a quarterback. And I looked this up, Chris, because not only did he break the freshman passing record, single game passing record with 377 yards, he crushed it by over 125 yards. But according to what I was able to find out, there's only been 15 better single game passing performances in UVA history. 15. And 8 of those were by Armstrong.
Yeah.
The other 7, 3 was by Ben Kirk, 1 by Mark Verica, 1 by Matt Schaub, 1 by Aaron Brooks, and 1 by Bryce Perkins. So this kid, in his first start as a true freshman, was 2 yards away from being tied with Perkins for one of the top 15 performances of all time in Wahoo history. That, to me, that was very impressive.
What jumped out, so many things jumped out to me about him as the game was going on. And then since being, going back and pouring through the numbers, he's not afraid to throw the ball in the tight windows. He did get one pass picked off as a result of his confidence in his arm. But, he hit a lot of guys in tight windows. He also leads guys so well. He had 217, his receivers, I should say, had 217 yards after catch. That says that he's throwing the ball and leading guys to gain more yards. Sometimes a lot of times you can complete a pass, and if the ball's behind a guy or too low or too high, they get what they got. They get the yards they got where they caught the ball, and that's it. 217 of his 377 yards were after the catch. You mentioned the moving his feet and keeping plays alive. There could be 2 plays there. The first play of the third quarter, where he kept that play alive and found Kobe Pace out of the backfield on a wheel route. I remember looking at, I see this guy streaking towards the end zone, and I looked down at the stat broadcast to see who that was, because I couldn't see right, with my naked eye with the number of the receiver. And when I saw that it was Kobe Pace, I figured that somebody had entered the information wrong. There's no way he found a wide receiver on that play, a running back on that play, but he did. There was another play in, I think, the third quarter where, it looked like that he drew it up in the dirt. Him and Paris Jones. He was just evading a rush. He's running around the backfield, and all of a sudden he points Paris Jones to a certain spot, throws it to him. Jones gains 60 yards on a catch and carry, completely out of nowhere. And that's the kind of thing, like you said, Jerry, you can't coach that, you can't teach that. Either you got it or you don't, and most guys don't. So that's special. And you thank the Lord that you found a guy like that, and then you build around those talents eventually.
Absolutely. And this was brought up on another show earlier, but now that they've got him, and if he continues to improve, they've got to worry about keeping him next year, because you're from South Florida or Central Florida, and you're having a really terrific freshman campaign, starter or not. Don't know how much you'll get to play. That's yet to be determined. But the way we're seeing poaching and tampering going on in college football, you can't tell me that there's not going to be some programs down in Florida, and there's a bunch of them, or somewhere down in that vicinity of the country. They're going to come looking for guys like him to jump in and be their quarterback. And so that's something that Virginia has to be leery of. And also, the transfer portal is a very tempting thing for a kid who wants to win. And if Virginia's season goes haywire, he might not want to stick around. So that's something that they've got to be very attentive to, and try to keep recruiting him and some of the other players so they don't lose them through the portal, like they lost so many good players last year who we assumed were just going to stick around and help them build, but instead they're wearing uniforms in Nebraska and Florida State and Missouri and Iowa and all over the daggone place.
Yeah, that's the challenge now for coaches to build a program. I mean, Tony Elliott's in year 2 of trying to rebuild here, and in the good old days, which aren't that many years ago, but especially when you go further back, you could say, all right, we got a freshman quarterback. He's got, even if he only gets this one game, he was 20 for 26, 377, 2 touchdowns. He looks like he knows what he's doing. If that's all he gets, then hey, we can redshirt him. We know what he can do. We can we still got 4 years with this guy. We can really build around this guy for the next 4 years, perhaps. Don't have to rush him into development and, maybe retard his progress as a result of that. And, no, you can't do that now. You can't assume anything. And that's the hard thing for Tony Elliott. I mean, there's, people are asking me like, okay, so what building blocks do you see that he's laid out that you can say are going to be there in 2 or 3 or 4 years? And you'd love this that he can build around and have this program when these guys get older, when they're just sophomores and juniors and seniors and redshirt juniors and seniors. What can, they can really be good by then. You'd love to be able to say Colandrea, man, look at that guy. I can't wait till he's a redshirt junior, redshirt senior. And what can he be doing then? Yeah, he might not be there. He might not be in school in January, much less in 4 years. So that's hard. It's a hard reality in terms of rebuilding a football program. We want to give coaches 4 or 5 years to be able to do that, but the players themselves make that decision as much as anything.
Yeah, it's the world we live in, and it's just wacky. I mean, we're seeing things we never thought we would see. I think the JMU quarterback, McLeod, I think this is his 7th year of college football. Somebody said. I thought it was just 6, but apparently it's 7. I saw another guy the other day on TV. He was in his 7th year of college football. We haven't seen stuff like that since post World War II, when they didn't monitor things so well as they do now, and guys were jumping from school to school to school. And maybe at BYU we see that every now and then because of the exemptions they have out there. But I mean, that's just crazy.
Indeed. Well, Friday night is it's the first of 2 Fridays for UVA football fans. This one up at Maryland in College Park, the old rival up there, old ACC rival. Of course, Jerry and I will both have lots of previews leading up to that. There's some basketball recruiting news, Jerry. I know we had talked about this last week, so give us some updates on how things are going in terms of visits and that kind of thing.
Yeah, a little bit. Big week coming up. We're almost there. I mean, we're almost at midweek. My gosh, it seems like the weekend flew by. But come Saturday, they're going to get a second unofficial visit from one of the top 50 juniors in the country, a Caden Lewis, 6'2" combo guard from Sidwell Friends up in D.C. He visited Virginia last season, I believe, during football season. And he was offered by Virginia in July. He has already visited Maryland and Georgetown as of late. He has a visit planned to Florida State next month. And he's been offered by a lot of good schools: St. John's, Providence, Maryland, Penn State, Nebraska, George Mason, FSU. He also plans, and I haven't seen offers from these schools, but maybe they've made it and I haven't seen it, but he's also planning visits to Oregon and Ohio State. Virginia started recruiting him sometime during his sophomore year, early on. I think Jason Williford made some strong inroads there, and he has been in pretty constant communication with Williford and Tony Bennett ever since. He likes those guys. He likes the staff. He likes Virginia basketball. He can see himself fitting in well. He's ranked the number 13 or number 10 combo guard in the country consensus, and the number 2 overall prospect in the DC area. He does like the approximation between his home and Charlottesville, which is only 134 miles. So it's good for him and his family if he chooses to come here. And Virginia is definitely searching for a guard for the 25 class, and he's right in the mix. So it'll be interesting to see how this 4-star does on his visit here. I'm sure it'll be well, but the big visit this week, Chris, is Thursday by Kon Knueppel, Virginia's main recruiting target. I don't ever recall Tony Bennett going to these lengths to try to sign a player or get a player committed. It's going to be a really busy week for Knueppel. He must have taken a week out of school or something, because I know he was at Alabama at the football game against Texas Saturday. I'm told he was going to go to Wisconsin and Marquette, or one of those two, or maybe both, maybe Sunday, Monday, or Monday, Tuesday. He will be here on Thursday, I believe. And I don't know how long he's sticking around. And then he'll be taking his final visit to Duke sometime Friday or Saturday. So I would expect that by the end of this whirlwind recruiting trip, he'll have a better picture of where he's going to wind up. To me, it seems like it's a Virginia Duke horse race, but we don't know that for sure. He's not saying much, but this guy's the real deal, Chris. I've watched as much film of him as I can find, and he's the J.J. Redick kind of game-changing shooter. And can you imagine him in the lineup with next year with Rhodey and Isaac McNeely, all three of those guys in the lineup at the same time as a three guard lineup? I mean, there might not be enough points on the board, but scoreboard. But I think he's a better overall player than J.J. Redick, because he does more than just shoot 3-pointers. He has a really good, strong, all-around game. Comes from a incredible basketball family. His dad was a solid player. His mom was a solid player. I think he has a couple of uncles that were solid players. And I wrote in a story, I think last week, that according to a basketball recruiting insider somewhere up in the north, who told the Wisconsin website that covers the Badgers, that this guy said he is, from what he's been told by those around Bennett, that Tony Bennett has never gone to these lengths to get a player before, and is calling in every contact that he's ever had, particularly in the state of Wisconsin, to get Kon Knueppel in an orange and blue uniform next year. So what a massive visit. I would love to be just a fly on the wall and follow him around for his visit here and just see what it looks like when Tony Bennett rolls out the red carpet.
The red carpet, yeah.
We've seen red carpets, but this is the red carpet. So I would love to see what that's like. And maybe if we're fortunate, somewhere down the road, we'll get Knueppel on a podcast and ask him what that's like being treated like the King of England or something.
Yeah. We can start to guess. We know what food he'll be having. He'll have some barbecue catered in, probably. Unless somehow they've gotten word that he likes something else. But we know the food from the Fish and Pig and among the red, but the red carpet. Yeah. I love the way you said that.
Yeah, if he went to Alabama this past weekend, he probably got some barbecue. So he hadn't had Virginia barbecue yet. So we'll see what that's like.
See what that's like. That's right. Well, we'll look for more updates on that, both on the website and then next week when we talk on the Jerry Ratcliffe Show. What else is going on, Jerry, that's got your attention as we're getting close to wrapping up the show?
Well, not a lot because I've been I've delved so deeply into football. I haven't really kept up with some of the other sports like I should have. But I thought it was interesting news that yesterday they announced that Wally Walker's coming back to join the athletic department in a role to explore where Virginia can go financially in athletics, and brought in a new VAF director from Georgia as well to help raise money. So it'll be interesting following what happens along those lines over the next so many months, and see what difference these two fellows can make. Wally Walker, he was so kind to us. I guess sometime last year, Chris, he spent an hour with us on a podcast from his home in Seattle. I think he has a home here now. He may still have a home in Seattle. I don't know, but one of the best people I've ever known. He's just such a down to earth guy, and everything he has touched pretty much has turned to gold. So maybe he can help Virginia in those regards as well.
He's one of the most, not just on the basketball court. He averaged 22 points a game and led the Virginia Cavaliers team to its first ACC tournament championship way back in '76. But he's one of the most accomplished, UVA students, UVA graduates, much less UVA student athlete graduates that you'll ever see. I mean, gosh, from the standpoint of being the Seattle Supersonics president and CEO, the Seattle Storm WNBA team, he had a similar role. He's been in business for himself. He's got his MBA from Stanford. He served on the UVA Board of Visitors. He's been very successful in business on his own. On top of being Wally Walker,
a model.
Oh yeah, on top of being Wally Walker. I mean, he could have just been Wally Walker and life would have been great. But he's done all those other things, and now he's coming back to his alma mater to try to pitch in and help out. So that is a remarkable story. Maybe worth getting him on a future podcast to talk about what he's going to be doing on grounds here in the next little bit.
Yeah, we'll do that. And it's stories like Wally and Don Flo, who I had a podcast with last week. If you haven't listened to that, and you're a Wahoo fan, you should listen to it, because it shows you what these guys can do with a Virginia education, and it really does matter. It's not just a 4-year. They use this as a sales pitch, but it's not a cliche. It's not just 4 years; it's 40 years, and what you do with that diploma once you leave here, because not everybody is going to play in the NFL or be a Wally Walker in basketball. At some point, all that runs out, even if you do make it. So, if you have that diploma and that kind of smarts, it shows you what you can do with your life and be so successful on so many different levels. And you can't say that about every other place that you go to school. So if you're a Wahoo fan, you ought to listen to the Don Flo thing. It's got some great stories in there about football and not football, but I think if you're a Wahoo, you'll totally enjoy it.
Indeed. Well, Jerry, as we're I guess we're wrapping up now. Let's thank the sponsors who help make all this possible and make it for our listeners and viewers to be able to access the information without charge.
Let's do that. Aberdeen Barn, Virginia's finest steakhouse. Great atmosphere, great service, great food. You see some of the same waiters over there that you've known for years. Such friendly guys that will bend over backwards to make your experience a great one. If you want to go over there and keep up with whatever games are on, they have a lounge area with TVs going, so you can keep up with games while you dine there. Otherwise, you can just relax in a great atmosphere and taste some of the best food that Charlottesville has to offer. So go by and see Angela and Terry right there off of 29. Also, the Good Feet store over at Stonefield, right across from the movie theater. Jonathan Cotton, great guy, NIL Virginia supporter. If you're having any kind of discomfort standing, walking, running, dancing, whatever you may do, go by and see them. They have specially designed arches for your feet that they do right there in the store. They can fix you up, and even if you don't have discomfort, they can make it like you're walking on air. So go by and see those people. I'm a customer. I can testify that it's a great product. And also, Roback. I don't have my doggy on today, but another local company, Virginia people, NIL, support the UVA program, Darden School graduates, Charlottesville-based company, sports activewear, men's line, women's line. They have a new UVA gear line. Go on my website, check them out, get 20% off your first order. It helps us bring you this free content. It helps them grow as a company, and they are one of the fastest growing companies around, as is the Good Feet store. So please thank all of these great sponsors and tell them you appreciate them bringing you this free content.
Jerry, I noticed that logo a little earlier. That looks like a Masters logo. Is that from Augusta National?
It is a Masters logo.
Okay.
It was from my last trip down there covering the tournament. And for anybody that's ever been in the Augusta National store there, I challenge you, if you can walk in that store and out without spending $400, I'll buy you a beer.
You might need the beer after spending $400, right?
Yeah.
But no, that stands out. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, for our listeners out there and our viewers out there on YouTube, go to jerryratcliffe.com, go to augustafreepress.com for the latest on UVA sports. For the Hall of Famer, Jerry Ratcliffe, I am fortunate to be Chris Graham. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show, and we look forward to talking to you again very soon.